For those listeners, those mortgage holders who were on fixed loans and coming off those fixed loans early this year, as it was predicted that it would be tens or hundreds of thousands would, and now being faced with an interest rate rise, I guess you've got to be extra attentive to how every dollar is spent if you're working fairly tightly on your revenue versus your expenses. Any thoughts for people who are now really moving into a time of pain where they're really feeling the bite of these interest rate rises?
Yeah, so look, this is a huge issue. I think they estimate roughly a third of home loans were fixed during the COVID period. And so it's something like nearly 800,000 households will be affected by it. They're referring to it as the mortgage cliff of these people coming off their fixed loans this year. So a couple of things I would suggest that they potentially consider. One is obviously refinancing the home loan to try and get the best possible deal. Another option may be to consider looking at fixed rates at the time and asking yourself how much more if rates were to go up much more, how much more could we handle before we'd risk being at default or not being able to pay our other bills. So refixing may be an option for some people, not necessarily everyone, because it's circumstance driven. I would also really encourage people in advance to do a budget and work out what expenses are fixed and what expenses are variable. In other words, what things can you cut out? So if all of a sudden your home loan jumps 45%, which is what the average home loan has jumped over the last 12 months so far, if you have that sort of jump, the question is, well, what waste can you cut out of your budget so that you can make sure you can continue to repay your loan? If you've still got surplus, I would seriously consider making extra repayments to get the loan down as much as you can. Also, that'll allow you to build up a buffer. So you've got margin in your finances. So if you lose your job and things like that, you're not going to be in a position where you're forced to sell. You've got time on your hands to regather and reboot. So there are a couple of little things. And at the most extreme, house prices are down, depending on which state you look at, but they're down about 10, 15%. At the most extreme, some people might have to be, seriously consider selling if they're finding themselves that it's just all too much. Because sometimes that pressure is too much. You get yourself into more and more trouble, and it may well be worth actually selling. Now, that's at the more extreme end, and taking advantage of the fact that prices in Australia are still very high historically. So yes, they've come off, but they're still very, very high. Housing's still very expensive. So it may be worth considering that at the extreme level.